All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. Episode 100.
This is a very special episode. It is episode 100, and we actually didn't plan to get together for episode 100, but it just worked out that way. We're going to start with a little bit of fitness stuff because we're going to fix Heaths squats, and hopefully you in the audience get a little something from it. Now, the setup of the rack and everything is a little different than I would normally do, but this is the best visual arrangement we kind of came up with. I guess we should start with the standard disclaimers of I'm not your trainer, I don't know you, you haven't signed a waiver, which is the most important part. You haven't signed a health questionnaire or anything for me. So if you do anything based on what we say here, it's at your own risk. Please consult a doctor. If you have trouble following things visually, then hire a trainer. And to emphasize that point, I would like to give an example of something I see daily. If I tell somebody to do something like this, a lot of times I get this. So if you have trouble just following things visually, then please get somebody to watch you. But those are the standard disclaimers. No health advice. I cannot diagnose nor treat injury. We're probably going to come across some things that ail him when he squats, which is why we kind of came up with this episode to begin with. But squat 101, here we go.
Well, and if you go back however many months ago it was, where we did, last time we were together, where we did the knee evaluation, that's part of where this comes from, is I've been trying to get my balance back, as well as, part of that is the stability, which is you're going to see in the squat, a major component of it, especially when you bottom out, is how stable are you? Or do you shift around because you've got some, hip issues or something like that? So I've been working on those things since. We've talked about me and my struggles and how much I hate single leg RDLs now, but I do them specifically for balance, and not just for balance, but hip placement, hip movement. Is when you do something like an RDL or like a Bulgarian squat, are you doing this? Right? So I do it consciously trying to foot flat on the floor, hips squared up, and that kind of movement. I've also been doing leg presses as my primary anterior leg exercise. So a lot of the fitness community will complain about machines, and rightly so to an extent. But keep in mind that it's not the wrench's fault if you use it to hammer in a nail and hurt yourself, okay? And don't get the nail in. A machine is just that. A weight machine is a machine like anything else. It is there to assist you and make the work easier.
Well, and not to derail the original topic here, but machines actually are a good stepping stone for some people. Because say I've got, well, let me borrow the bar here, and I'll come out facing this way. If I'm going to do an overhead press, there is a lot that goes into it, even with a barbell, to keep everything in line, and the machine keeps you in line. Now it's limited because you never work on that stability, but you can still start the journey of getting in shape, building that deltoid strength, building the chest strength, building the tricep strength by pressing with the machine, and it's a lot safer. Now, where we get into the problem is it does limit your motion. So you never do work on the stability aspect. So it's kind of a stepping stone. Get the base strength with the machine and then step to the free weights. Or sometimes you just need that guidance. So start with a machine till you are taught the way to do it properly with the barbell or the dumbbells. Now the leg press is one of the few machines I wish I could fit into this setup. This is 600 square feet. But at the same time, every square foot is precious when I have 4 people in here. So I do wish I had a leg press for those things, because you can do a lot of volume training without the core impact that squats and things like that have as well.
Brett Contreras has a good quick video on the leg press, because there is a right and a wrong way to do it. And a lot of people, if you go to a public gym, do it wrong. The main way in that they fold themselves in half.
Yeah, and that's the key. You got to keep your hips attached to the machine. If you let your hips rotate up, well, then you see how my back's curved there. But let's get on to the squat 101. And so I kind of know what I'm gonna see with Heath a little bit, just from working with him, but I'm gonna start from scratch for you guys. When I get a new client and I want to introduce something like the squat, which is one of the first things we do because it's a pretty all-inclusive exercise, and you see the setup is for a free weight environment. Depends on the client. If they're completely new to exercise at all, then I'll do it a little bit differently. But if I get somebody who's been training for a while, I don't want to coach something I don't need to coach. So what I usually ask, and you'll go ahead and face this way to begin with, is just get under the bar and give me about 5 reps. So I'm gonna have him do that right now. All right, so just get under the bar and give me about 5 reps. And I'm gonna stand on this side because it makes me look taller than you. We're both above average height guys and stature, so. Okay, so we see some stuff as it is. Okay. All right, that's good.
You know what I forgot to do is part of my warm up. Talked about last time we were talking about squats, stripper squats.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, we're gonna get to that though. We're gonna go ahead and get to that, because especially since this is something he needs to work on. We did warm up before we started this, so if we're a little bit sweaty, we apologize. But right off the bat, obviously he squatted before. He was very methodical in how he did it. There was no loose movement. There wasn't a whole lot of wild and out of control movement. So that's the first step. So the first things you want to look for is people like dropping into their squat. That's already a tell that they have no control over the downward movement. We'll kind of circle back to that later, just because it's not the problem at hand. But what we did see was, if I can get into the camera here, we saw an extreme kind of outward motion of the toes. This is something that is specific to your client, but also specific to the training style. So when I'm talking the squat, I do want to clarify some terminology here. My standard squat is a high bar squat, if you're in the powerlifting world. The high bar squat is the default. If you're specific to powerlifting, then we introduce the low bar. And I'll give you the visuals on that. High bar is going to be up on the traps, the base of the neck. And the low bar squat is going to be down kind of mid-scapular area. And so this is a powerlifting technique if I put my feet out where I can get nice and deep with a really heavy weight. So it's a lift specific technique, low bar squat. It does a couple things. First of all, it lowers the bar so you only have to squat so low to get to depth. If you have a big giant belly like a power lifter, you can bounce off your thighs. And the other part is when you're a bigger dude, you do need to spread out a little bit more because of all of the mass you have in here. Now that's very specific to a sport. So I do bring it in for what's called the high bar squat, which is to me just a standard squat. And we work in a natural kind of gait pattern for general health. Now the toes out is individual because it depends on your hip socket. So he's got that Norman based on his last name, but also based on where his family's from, that kind of Normandy lineage, which is going to have a little bit deeper hip socket. Where I've got Eastern Bloc lineage, Polish, Czech, bohunks as they would call them, the Bohemian fellas, where we've got that shallow hip socket, so I can drop into a squat pretty damn easy. All right. So he does need a little bit of toes out, but not so much as he's doing. Okay. So what we want to find out is why he has to get down into that area, into that splayed out position to get further down. That's where that stripper squat comes in. All right, so let's move this out of the way. That's probably this one right here for that stripper squat. So what I would have him do is turn his toes forward about shoulder width, not quite hip width, Again, he's got that deeper hip socket, so he can't go hip width. And now he's gonna squat as deep as he can and use this to keep him from falling backwards. So if you let go, you can fall backwards. So you see he's gonna fall backwards. But he's got a nice straight back. There's very little butt wink, and he's able to do it. So this is the goal. Now come up just a little bit. Come up just a little bit. Oop, a little bit down. All right, so now we're parallel. So we got the knee to the hip is parallel to the ground. And his toes are relatively forward. So this is his point right here. We know he can get there if we just work on the mobility and the strength to do it. And he's barefoot, so there's no shoe variables to worry about here. Now he might benefit from a little bit of an elevated heel because that'll push him forward a little bit, but not too much because then it'll put too much stress on the knee. So now pull yourself into it. Oh, no, go back to parallel. So this is the goal. We want parallel. Pull yourself in with your hands. There you go. Now try to open up. There you go. Okay. So this is a strain. So now what I would do with a new client is, how far can you go without falling back? All right. So let's figure out that point right now. So how far can you go without falling back? Not bad, right there. Okay, so we're pretty damn close to parallel. Now to do it with load is a little different question. Right? So this is where my boxes are holding up the camera and stuff. So let's get a bench. This is going to be a little tall for him, I think. But this is where the box walk comes in. Now, I use a box at a corner because if you have them at the edge of it, they tend to sit back like this. Whereas if I can spread my feet out, I can go into a regular squat. This is where you would utilize the box squat. Be careful not to just have them sit down with weight because it's a lot of pressure on the low back. Now we can teach a skill. So I'm going to have him straddle this with, and he doesn't have shoes on now, but you're going to grip the ground with your feet and you're going to spread the floor. So I feel tension all along this line. So my whole foot is making contact and I'm spreading the floor. If I was on a slick surface, I would do the splits. All right. So I'm going to spread the floor on the way down, and that creates stability all the way up here. All right. So let's see that.
So this is why I started talking about what I've been doing on the leg press. Because one of the benefits of that is, since it's pushing back into you, you get that experience of the pressure from the floor. And if you concentrate on feeling the weight evenly between your feet and pushing and spreading as you come down, you can simulate that and you can build. So again, as you pointed out, that was the point, is it's a stepping stone. I knew I was having trouble with squats with my hips and knees, and I needed to work back up to them. Same thing here.
So spread the floor, spread your knees. There you go. All right, now come back up. Now do it with just a tap of your butt. Don't sit back. Tap of your butt, and then back up. Okay, so that's first goal. This one's a little high for him, so it's probably pretty easy. But you would find the distance based on their height, where you're looking at the parallel nature. So we'll get our bar back, and I'll have him do that same thing with the bar on his back. All right, and you just go down until I say come back up. All right, so we're going to find the proper depth here. All right, and you got a pretty good view there. So back it, toes forward, shoulder width. You're a little bit narrow. There you go. All right, shoulder width for you. Spread the floor all the way down. There you go. He looked a little awkward there, but he did it right. Okay, and this is a skill. Everything you do is repetition at this point. And then back. And one more time, spread the floor, and then back. Okay, so we saw his foot position. Go ahead and wrap it up. Was cleaned up very well because he was out here before, and now it was a little bit out, but not too bad. Okay, so we looked at his anatomy, we adjusted for it, and yeah, he's going to go down a lot in weight.
doing that, because this allows you to do a whole lot of weight, but at the same time, this is going to translate more to general health.
Plus, I'm more stable when I'm here because this is my natural it's a compensation. So, and you should be able to feel what's wrong as you do it, as you force yourself.
I'm going to do a little demo here. This is something Heath's never done, and I don't think you've ever done with me. We're going to show why, because we talked about this, right? So the lateral facing muscles in the hips prevent that extra movement. So you're talking about piriformis, glute medius, glute minimus to some degree, and they stabilize you. Well, they're shortened in this position, so it feels like you're stable, and it feels like they're working hard, but they're not. And we're going to do a little demonstration. So go into your old squat stance with your toes out, and get a good view for the people, the what like you used to do it with toes out, and squat deep. All right, and resistant. That was pretty easy.
Yeah.
Now go into what we just worked on. Squat deep and resistant. You can see, hopefully, pick your arms up so you can see my arm. I'm actually straining. You can see the muscle straining right there. So, optimal stretch for power production. Comfortable stretch can't produce power.
Yeah, comfort's the key word there, because the reason I naturally reflexively do this, and if you're like me, you would immediately notice if you push yourself into a more proper stance, is tightness here. So when I'm here, there's less room for that hip socket, and so it's pushing, it's uncomfortable. That's why I'm not as stable. When I come out here, there's more room. I don't feel that pinching, that tightness here.
Which is something to account for, because again, he's got different hips than I do. You see, my shirt is about in line with my hips down. So I've got a long torso, short legs. He's very proportional. So his torso and legs are about even, and his hip socket is deeper. So that bone is more likely to hit the top of the iliac crest than it is for me. I can get down here with no problem. I'm like a freaking baby when it comes to that, except for the giant head, So you have to account for your client's anatomy. And I wish we could do a freaking anthropology study of people, because he's got that, again, that Norman, English, the worst are the Irish, actually. The Irish have really, really deep sockets. So they have trouble getting really deep, which is why you don't see very many Irish Olympic lifting champions, right? But the Chinese, you see a lot of them, especially in the lower weight classes, because they can duck foot it down there and pop right back up, because the socket's right at the edge. So that's from the hip down. Okay, so we kind of need to move on in this progression to keep this from going too long. That's from the hip down. Create a cam. Toes relatively forward. Use that stripper squat to find your natural spot where you can create a deep squat, back straight, chest up, and relatively comfortable. If even doing this is uncomfortable, then that's actually the first step. And I wouldn't even put a bar on your back. And again, we're going back to, if I trained anybody new, I might give them something like this, or a light dumbbell to sit back, because that's doing the same thing as the pole. It's giving me a counterweight. I can sit back on it, and then I can work that back until eventually I can have a weight on my back. All right. So that's a progression for you if you have trouble just even getting done. Now I'm going to assume most people are going to be a little more advanced if they're watching us. So we'll get back to the bar. But if you've just never exercised before, there's a first step for you. So that was hip down. Now we're going to go hip up, which is the part people ignore with the squats. And this is where leg press can't help you, because if you're doing the leg press right, everything from here up doesn't work, right? We created a cam by gripping the ground. Now we're going to create a cam by gripping the bar. So it's not just resting easy up here. It's up there. I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to pull it into my back. Not as hard as you can, but like you're doing a behind the neck pull up, just pull it into your back. And what that does is that activates all of this structure here, which is the latissimus dorsi, which is a big fan. Go ahead and turn this like a
Big honking muscle.
big honking muscle across your back. It attaches here, attaches to your spine, and then like wings comes up and actually to the front of your arm. So that all together, when you pull down, stabilizes your spine. So we stabilize down here with our hip action. Now we stabilize the spine with what we're doing up here, and then bracing the core. So bracing the core is not sucking in, it's tightening up like someone's about to punch you in the stomach. Like if I was just a boom, punch you right in the gut, he wouldn't go, he would tighten up. All right, so brace the core, pull the bar into your back, and feel how stable that is. So you're already activating your glutes, you're bracing your core, you're bracing your back. It's tension under control. It's mobility through tension. So you are controlling the weight and your body on the way down, but able to move. And that's the ultimate goal in all our exercises, realistically, is to be able to move through a full fluid range of motion with enough tension to prevent injury, right? So now let's add that to it, because I know your spine is actually the big issue with your squat. So we've already worked on the hips. So shoulder width, a little bit wider, a little bit wider. Okay, grip the floor, create the cam. Now grip the bar, pull into the back. Should be tight, okay. Now spread the floor. Oh, he tightened up too much a little bit. But that's okay, because now we know the limitation. Okay. So again, I kind of quipped in there that the spine is his problem. When we tighten this up, notice how everything else tightened up. So this is where you don't force things. You don't force the motion.
And I can tell when I go as low as I want to go.
You know, your toes turned up, your feet turned up.
Well, also look at my low back.
Yeah.
It goes, eh.
Yep. So now we're finding the limitations. When I tightened up his core, everything fell out of place. So he constantly has pain with regular squats, which is like his leg press and everything. And I kind of knew what I was going to see, but this is a good example of it. And it's an extreme example, obviously, because he had a neck injury at a young age. So it kind of is playing into this talk a little bit. But you're going to see degrees of this. Everything's a spectrum, right? As we've talked about in other episodes. When we tightened up his core and he all of a sudden lost everything else, well, that kind of gave us the inverse of what the problem is, because he's focusing on the depth and he's using compensation patterns to get lower. Well, now we got a trickle up effect of the pain. So he's compensating by creating flexibility downstairs. Well, obviously the problem was up here. And so when you do that, all the force from the ground, from the bar coming down and the ground coming up is going to shoot up to the place of the problem, right? So this is where we got to take a bird's eye view of his whole body to say, his pain is being reinforced by the compensation patterns. And so now we've got to, again, we talked about this before, is there structured or unstructured? Like, well, there is a correct way to move in most cases. We just got to find that specific correct way for his body. And obviously the old way wasn't working. The old way was creating more pain because he was compensating, and there's something wrong up here that's able to go through a bigger range of motion than it's comfortable with because of the compensation. So diagnosing his squat, what we probably ought to do is get his hips in the right order and then gradually work the depth and weight from the top down. Whereas someone who is too flexible, you would kind of take the reverse diagnosis with that. So, anything you want to add to it before we?
Something we'll actually, when we sit down with an adult beverage and rant a little more later, that's something you wanted to rant about, which is that don't get so focused. There's a reason we have sayings, one of which is you can't see the forest for the trees.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're focused in too small, you're going to forget that the body is an interconnected machine, right? So one of the ways I've impressed people really isn't that impressive if you just know a little bit, which is be able to look at how they're moving, look at, you know, where they might have chronic pain or tightness and say, I'll bet you had an issue with, you know, this. They're complaining about their knee, and I'll say, you had a back problem,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And it's like, it's because it's connected. So you're going to compensate. So that's why we started off talking about that with my stance of this is a compensation.
Mm-hmm.
So if all you do is focus on this, on the compensation, you're going to ignore the actual root cause.
Well, and we talked about sports with powerlifting. I'm going to show you a dirty little secret of powerlifting here with the low bar squat. So it's about depth. Okay, so we talk about depth of the squat. So you're taking your body through a fuller range of motion. The muscles are stretching out more. The joints are being challenged a little bit more. Let me show you a little something with the low bar squat. So I'm going to get into a powerlifter stance. I don't got the belly for it, thankfully. Nutrition is the bigger player there. Don't try to outwork your diet. But I'm going to go into a parallel squat. All right. So I'm parallel for powerlifting. Let me pull my feet in. I'm not parallel. I'm creating a false depth. I'm basically squatting here with 1,000 pounds. All right, because I'm a big giant man. Now, the elites, don't get me wrong, I respect them. Eddie Hall picking up 1,100 pounds, the first person to pick up a metric ton, all respect to you. But your local 24-hour fitness trainer that's got a belly out to here, I power lift. Yeah, you squat like this, buddy.
You're quarter repping it, bro.
You're quarter repping it. All right, we're going to take a short break. I think we'll probably come back to it a little sweaty still, but then we'll rant about some.
Oh, so many things.
Well, we're going to start with fitness because it was something we were talking about last night. Again, deal with body pain, and I do think so many clinicians go through life through the periscope of their specialization, and we miss so many things. So we'll probably start with that, and then we'll riff on so many other things.